Welcome to another episode of the Lead to Win podcast. This week, we visit with Michelle Enjoli, career development coach, keynote speaker, and content developer about what it takes to become a connected leader. I'm your host, Bo Bergen. Let's get to work. We have a great show today as we visit with Michelle Enjoli. Michelle is a career development coach and keynote speaker who teaches others how to become the CEO of their career. She was a first-generation college student who landed her dream job as a television producer before graduation with no experience or connections. Since then, she has developed content for global brands in television broadcasting and marketing like Univision, Telemundo, ABC, NBC and CBS, Mercedes-Benz USA, and Delta Airlines. Michelle has an idea worth sharing, and her talk, The Most Important Connection to Make for Success, is now available on TED. Her journey and work have been recognized by the Better Business Bureau and U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She has been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Glassdoor, Yahoo, and Rolling Stone, among other outlets. Please welcome Michelle Enjoli to the show. Michelle, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So when I started this podcast, obviously I'm from a sports background, but I also wanted I wanted to kind of merge and hear from different fields of leadership. And so I'm happy to have you on today and kind of talk from your point of view and your background. So kind of just start out, tell me kind of your story and how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. So I was born actually in a town in New Jersey, but it was very close to New York City. So I usually say it's like right outside of New York City because, on weekends with family, we'd take trips. So it'd be like going down the shore, we'd go into the city and stuff like that. But I was raised in a really large family. My parents are from the Dominican Republic. So my generation of me, my brothers, and my cousins, we were all first generation Americans. So all of our parents emigrated to the US, whether they were in their teenage years or older. And so coming from a large family who was bilingual and then living in a very diverse environment, I grew up with a lot of exposure, whether it was to different food, different people from all over the world. And so that kind of environment is what sparked my curiosity about people and stories, because I was constantly bombarded with a lot of different people. And so I wanted to study journalism when I went to school. So I'm one of those people that knew the exact job that I wanted when I studied broadcast journalism, which was to become a producer. I literally was like, I want to meet people, share their stories, and I want to do it in the morning because I'm a morning person. And so I literally had an exact job. And so I went to school, studied broadcast journalism, and ended up getting, my dream job in New York City, doing the exact same thing, producing human interest stories for a national morning show. And since then, I've pivoted a few times. And what happened, I had what I call now, it's actually a traumatic moment. In 2015, I was working for Mercedes-Benz USA, their national headquarters. And they had decided from one day to the next, which we saw it that way, to move their headquarters to Atlanta, Georgia from New Jersey. And so that kind of prompted a lot of different things where I had to help colleagues basically reinvent themselves, whether it's with resumes. I had colleagues who had never had another job, had never even interviewed anywhere else before. And so that was what led me to do the work that I do today as a career development coach, because I really saw a need for people, especially with the changing business environment, to consistently reinvent themselves and almost become like the CEO of their career, constantly network, constantly market. So that's a little bit where I've come from and what made me want to pursue the work that I do today.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's quite the journey. And sounds like there was a lot of changes there for a period of time for you as well as others. And have you kind of found your niche, do you think? I mean, do you feel like you've found your calling?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's interesting because people get me confused a lot with a career coach. And what I try to say is I'm more of a career development coach, where I actually like my passion is teaching people the skills where they never hopefully have to go out and cold call for a job, where they're consistently marketing themselves and building real connections with people, where if they need to make a transition, they kind of have a soft landing. And that's kind of where my specific niche is teaching people those necessary soft skills.
Yeah. So how exactly did you land that job? You know, most job industries are very competitive, but you know, you mentioned in your bio, no experience, no degree. How exactly did you accomplish that?
Yeah, so it's something, it sounds simple when people hear me say it, they're like, are you serious? But it was literally through having coffee with people. There's a little more to that, but so I mentioned I grew up in a big family. And so one of the things that I grew up witnessing was I love coffee. I love everything about the morning. And most of the time I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. And what I saw growing up was that the kitchen table and a cup of coffee was the place where like connections really took place. Like whether it was a family member, a neighbor, a friend, I grew up every morning. There was someone at the coffee table, and they were not just like gossiping. It was like, well, did you find a job? Like we were immigrants, right? And it was just talking about real world things, laughing at jokes, you know, learning about people's families. And so that came natural to me just because I grew up in that environment. And so what people call networking today, I grew up calling it as connecting with people over coffee. So when I was in school, I purposely decided to stay close to New York City because I knew I wanted to work there one day. And what I literally did was I took all the classes that I needed to take in broadcast journalism, and I literally became a producer. Like I interviewed, whether it was my teachers, whether it was other students, I would ask people if they had family members that worked in the industry. And I literally had like, I would say hundreds of coffee chats throughout college. I did internships. And so what I did was I took a little bit of the unconventional route where there were some semesters where I would take down my school workload from full-time to part-time so that I can do that internship or go and follow someone in New York City. And so I literally did it through making all these connections, staying, you know, adding value to them. And one thing led to the next, where one of my teachers recommended me for an internship at a local television station in New Jersey. And I literally did the exact same thing. I would have coffee with people. I would come in early. I'd try to learn everything as much as possible. And it was another coffee chat with a guest that led me to interview for this open position in New York City. And it was literally by chance. It was me one morning having coffee with someone I had built a really good relationship with. When they let me know that there was an opportunity available, they didn't know if I was going to get it because I was an intern, but I got a lot of recommendations from people that I had worked with at the station, and I ended up getting it. So it was pretty interesting.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's crazy how you fall into those things sometimes, and you kind of feel blessed to be where you are. And I kind of feel the same way in my position. There's things that just happen to me that you know, just by networking and just talking to people, and you know that can get you a long way in life sometimes. So, so what would you say the mindset that people who are professionals today have to stay competitive in such a competitive market and stay employed?
For sure. So there's no like special formula. Like I said, I went through that traumatic event where for me, the big like eye opener for me was that I had seen colleagues of mine who had given their entire lives, like people that had given 25, 30 years to a company, all of a sudden potentially find themselves unemployed. So what I always think, and this is what allowed me to really think about this in a different way, is think of yourself as a business. Like you own a personal brand. And that's literally what I built, was a curriculum where I change people's mindset to, even if you want to be an employee for the rest of your life, this is not about owning a company. It's about owning your reputation, owning your personal brand, and just being very proactive in networking, in, you know, building your skill sets. Your education doesn't end when you leave school. It should be about a mindset of consistently thinking like the owner of a company, of what gaps do I need to fill? What skills do I need to continue learning? And then most importantly, what relationships do I need to build? And so that's what I think really is the key today to staying successful and, you know, being able to rebound if something does happen, like a layoff or, you know, you're let go from a job.
You know, the relationships piece and the networking piece, networking is definitely crucial to across any industry for somebody that's wanting to get ahead. How do you network in such a digitally focused world?
For sure. So here's something that I would say, like, I've always hated the word networking just because someone who has been in the entertainment industry, I've witnessed people do it so bad. Like, for example, I'm sure you've been to conferences and people, they'll come up to you and they'll look at your badge to see if, like, what company are you from? And they kind of do the glance to see, are you worth someone, are you worth talking to? And so I've always felt that when people have instructed people to network, there's no real definition. Like, if you look in the dictionary, that definition doesn't really tell you anything. It just simply states, it's building relationships. And so what I did was I actually wanted to go back to something super simple. And what I did was I built my own definition for networking. I call it connecting. And what the definition states is it's just an authentic way to learn or assist someone. So, and this is how I break it down, especially for students who, like you mentioned, are so used to being in a digital environment that they're often shell-shocked when it's time to leave school and go interview or they start their first job. And so what I mean by that is it's three important pieces. Is when you're interacting with people, think about one, being authentic. You don't have to change who you are, just be authentic in your interactions. And then do one of two things when you're interacting, and if possibly both. Either learn from people. So there's tons of questions, especially as a young professional or someone looking to pivot into a new career. There's always 1,000 questions you can ask someone to learn from them. That helps soften, that conversation, because people love to talk about themselves, but also to give back and teach people things. And then the really important thing that helped me in my career a lot was, if you are engaging with someone and there is an opportunity to assist them, whether you can offer up free services. If you're a student and you want to get into, let's say, planning events, offer to help someone at an event for free, offer up your services or offer up a resource. So if you know someone that can help them, those I think are really powerful ways to genuinely connect with people. Because I always tell someone, the way that I was consistently remembered was because that person who I wanted to remembered me because I assisted them with something. I provided them with some kind of value that helped them remember me. And so that's the three things that I tell people to focus on as they're going about the world. And it can be anywhere. It can be in a professional setting, but I've met people online at a coffee shop or sitting in a meeting. So I think that that's a philosophy that you can take into your everyday life, whether it's personal or professional.
So how do you build a valuable, usable, relevant personal brand for yourself as a professional?
Sure. So it's funny, I read this quote years ago and this stuck with me, and it was from Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. And he said something that really resonated with what I was doing and then also teaching others was, your personal brand is what people say when you are not in the room. And that is so true, because I work with lots of professionals who, it's interesting because, I'll look at their LinkedIn or they'll send me their resume and they're just having trouble, whether it's growing in their company, getting a promotion or getting another job. And they do everything right aesthetically, right? They have the great LinkedIn headshot, they have the right resume and everything. But what they're missing is that relationship part. Like, you think that you're building this brand by saying and showing the right things, but how do you make people feel? Like, in your day-to-day interactions, what value are you giving to people? What is it that you want to be known for? And it kind of starts off with personal branding is, what is it that you want to give back to the world? What do you want to be known as? Because if you don't know that, you don't have a playbook to kind of go by. What values do you have? What are your goals? And so it's working from that point of view, is being authentic, but then also building a brand that, one, gets you to where you want to go, helps you accomplish your goals, but also is, something that the brand that you're trying to portray is actually the brand that you actually have. So when you ask others who work with you or interact with you, they're saying this kind of things that you want them to say, because it's true.
Yeah, I've heard the term perception is reality over and over again. I think that's very true with, especially with your interactions with people. First impressions mean a lot. So,
For sure.
Kind of shifting gears to the leadership side of things. What, in your own words, what do you think the definition of leadership is, and what does it mean to you?
So for me, I do something where I work with some leaders where I call leadership today should be connected leadership, right? And so to me, my official definition for a connected leader is someone who not only can connect and forge relationships with the people that they lead, but most importantly today is someone who can forge relationships and connections among the people that they lead. So for example, if you are someone who is a leader of a team of 20 to a team of 100 or 200 or thousands, what are you doing to not only connect with the people that you lead, but also ensure that you can build connections among them? Because that's the whole point of a team, right? It's not a one person effort. It's a full set of people who might be in today's world different generations, different culturally. And so I think to me, a connected leader, a great leader is someone who can absolutely also forge connections among their team, not just with them.
Yeah, that's good. I've never heard it from that angle. That's really good. So do you believe that people are born with leadership qualities, or do you think that's something that they kind of learn from their mistakes or their successes? What's your philosophy on that?
It's interesting. I feel like it's something that's more learned than innate. I think you could be born with some innate qualities, right? Someone, can have some natural leadership abilities. But I think that in today's world, especially because of all the changes and all the different dynamics that exist, there is definitely, I feel like every leader should never stop learning, because I think that what worked in leadership 5 years ago is definitely not working today. And so that's something that I think that is something that is definitely should be a lifelong pursuit with learning.
Absolutely. So today's topic is obviously connected leadership. What does it mean to be connected as a leader, and how important is that connection to, the effectiveness of the organization as a whole?
Sure. So to me, connected leadership today is, I have an acronym. It's called, it's leader, right? And so what it stands for is, to me, a connected leader is someone who, one, the L is for listens, right? Someone who actively listens. So it's not just, someone that, when I mean actively listens, that they take the feedback into consideration and you see that feedback at work. Then I also believe in engagement, being engaged, an engaged leader. I've worked at really major companies, and one thing that I'll never forget is this one person who was the CEO of one of the companies I worked for, and he used to do something amazing where on a random day, he would leave his office on the top floor and just randomly walk across the building in different floors. And if someone was, let's just say, working on something, he'd just pop in. And he'd just say hello. If he didn't know the person, he'd introduce himself. He'd ask about what they were working on. And just for like those 5 minutes meant the world to that employee, because they just spoke to the CEO. So little simple things like that. So like really engage with people, I think is really meaningful. One of the other qualities, assisting. Definitely be a leader who assists. Like, what resources does my team need to, get from point A to point B? Can I, aside from mentorship, but where can I really assist a team? And then diversification. So I think that someone who has just like a diverse mindset, someone that can really also be empathetic and respectful. So something that I've seen time and time again, and, I've been around a lot of leaders in different companies, not just that traumatic moment in 2015 where I saw a company literally move headquarters and have to, let go of many employees, but also a lot of different scenarios where sometimes leaders are just so far removed from what, like, that frontline level of employees, where you lose empathy or you lose, that connection. And so for me, I love a connected leader, and I love leaders who literally make an attempt to engage with that front line. Because when you work at big companies, especially, and I've worked at companies at all different sizes, the bigger the company is, the more layers, right, of leadership exist. But I've seen top leaders of big companies do it really well, where they've intentionally made it a point to engage at the bottom levels of their, companies, which I think is really important. And to them, they're like, this is where we actually get the raw feedback, no filters. We get the feedback that we maybe need to move the company forward. So I think those are all really important qualities.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So what are some strategies that you could give us that leaders can employ in order to be more connected?
Well, I think removing those layers. Like the one thing I see often all the time, and I hear this from the employee perspective, but also from the leader perspective of, big companies almost getting too big, and to the point where those communication channels kind of get fuzzier and fuzzier the higher you go. And so I think that the most important thing a leader can do is find opportunities to directly engage with people at what I call your front lines, right? So whatever company that you are leading, who are the employees that are directly facing with customers, who are directly facing in the production of the services or the goods that your company produce? Make it a point to routinely engage with those people in a manner where they can be truthful, give you real, honest feedback. Because sometimes, it's like I call it telephone, right? You have a frontline employee who might voice a concern, and if there's 3 levels of management in between them and executive management, by the time it gets to executive management, who knows what kind of information gets to that senior level because of, different things, different filters, different, again, different ways of people communicating or wanting to give that real, raw, honest feedback to executives. So I think that's really important, is just removing all those layers and really directly communicating with the people that are delivering your products or services.
Just take care of problems or concerns as quickly as you can, and you can do that quicker if you're engaged with the people on the front lines, like you said. And so chain of command can be a good and a bad thing, for sure.
For sure.
So in the world of high school or college athletics, which is my field, building relationships is something that's always talked about with players or student athletes, or, how does that philosophy align with the business world, for example?
So here's something, it's interesting because lately, like, I have a few clients who are professional athletes or will be, playing at the college level. And it's interesting because one of the things that I work with, one of them in particular, who more than likely will go pro, he's really struggling. And this is something that I started this whole my career development program on. You have to first learn how to authentically connect with yourself. The relationship with yourself is the most important, because forget about even an athlete who, let's just say, will play at the professional level, but even as a professional, I talk about this with women all the time. Who you are in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that can change based on whether, you're early in your career, you have a family, right? Your priorities change and things that are important changes, but you have to remain consistent and not lose that connection with yourself, like who you are. And that happens a lot, especially I see this a lot with younger people just due to social media and all the distractions that they have around me. I mean, I seriously don't know how athletes today playing at the high school and college level really manage, schoolwork, playing, all the social aspect, the personal aspect, and then adding all that extra distraction that comes along with that, with media. And so that's something that I start with, is making sure that you fully take the time to understand who you are. That's like the baseline for anything. And then from there, you're starting to build relationships. And that's where personal branding comes into place too, where, what is the brand that you want to create? What are some of your goals? And so, for example, one of my clients who, will more than likely go pro, I had to, work with him on certain things like social media presence. What does that mean? If you're someone who's highly visible, and I feel like in today's world, no matter who we are, we're all highly visible if we're professionals. Make sure that every level of your life is consistent with, one, who you are, and then also the personal brand that you want to create. And so that's something that I think is really, really important. Always prioritize a relationship with yourself, and then use that to build solid relationships with others.
So most employees feel more connected to their leadership if they're given, a voice, or they feel like they're heard within the organization. How can leaders give their employees that voice, and how can employees take advantage of that?
Sure. So I'll give you a great example of I saw a senior leader do, where he would have an anonymous inbox. So for example, anyone that had a concern or a suggestion, and he was very specific. And if you have a concern or a suggestion, I'm willing to hear you, right? Because some people just love to complain. I've been in rooms where I can see leaders and someone just gets up and just starts complaining about something. It's not really concrete. This person said, if you have a legitimate concern or you have a suggestion to, make the organization or our products and services better, send me a note. This leader would respond to every single note that he got. And in many cases would follow up or would implement some of the strategies and suggestions. So I think that was fantastic.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Do you know how they, you said it was anonymous. That's just a side question. How did he follow up with that? Would he put them back in a box that people could go grab, or what's the process for that?
Well, it's interesting. In this specific example, it was anonymous. However, though, if you wanted to give your name, you could give your name, right? If you have a suggestion, but he wanted it to make it anonymous, like give that choice and voice that, because he just wanted people to feel comfortable. So for example, if someone did submit something and he wanted to follow up, some people did put their name, according to him. He says like, oh, there are people that would give me great suggestions, and they would, because in the messaging, when he first put this into practice, he did say it's completely anonymous. However, if you'd like, for me to follow up or why not, you can leave your name. But he made it a real big point to be really open about the anonymous part, because he really wanted raw and real feedback, which I thought was a really great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. If you want feedback, you want follow up, put your name on it.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if it's nothing negative or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So energy and enthusiasm are two key elements, in my opinion, of an organization that operates at a high level. How can a leader foster an environment of energy and enthusiasm while also holding their employees accountable?
Well, I think that one of the mistakes, and it's interesting because you see this a lot at the corporate level. So for example, when I was working for Mercedes-Benz, it was a corporate company, like many other companies that have been in place for a really long time. And I'm talking about companies, let's say, that have been in existence for 50 to 100 years or something like that. There comes a point, it was interesting because I later found out through executive leadership, this was one of the reasons I think the company decided that there was a time or a need for change, was sometimes people get complacent. So at companies that have this, that have been, longstanding companies that have, pretty much done well financially at a certain level, you can have a group of employees, especially employees who've been there for a while, that are just coming in to check the box and go home. There is really no energy and enthusiasm. And you can have leaders of those organizations who have been there in the same for a long time as well, who are just kind of checking a box. And what's interesting is that that's why I say the last 5 to 10 years, that's no longer something that can happen if you want to remain competitive and even survive. Like, you have to have enthusiasm. You have to be someone who is consistently, someone that has the energy to consistently innovate. Like, you can't just remain the same. I always tell people, if you look at the iPhone, which is something that most of us have in our hand almost all day, the iPhone that just came out this year, it's not the same iPhone that came out in 2007, right? When it debuted. Same thing. It's like we all have to innovate consistently. And that's the way we lead, the products and services that we provide. And the only way I feel like you can do that is exactly the reason that you said. You have to have energy and enthusiasm for what you're doing. And so that's something that's really ties into that part of my curriculum, where really be authentic and connect to yourself. Find opportunities where you feel are aligned with, your passion, the things that you enjoy doing, because that's really important. Because if you are in a position where you are aligned and you love what you do, the energy and enthusiasm will be there.
So, last couple questions here. Say I'm a leader listening to this, and maybe I've developed some of that complacency that you mentioned. I'm just kind of showing up to work, doing the stuff, and going home. I've kind of got a wall up maybe between my employees. I don't feel as connected to my job or the people that I work with. What advice would you give them to just kind of reignite that fire or break down that wall and become more connected with the people they work with? What words of advice or encouragement for that kind of person?
Sure. So I've been there a few times in my career as well. And one of the things that I suggest that people do is one, just fully understand, why are you complacent? So for example, is it the actual work that you're doing, right? I always say, look at the highest level, the company that you work for. Is it still like whatever you do, whatever you sell, whatever services or products you sell, is it something that you're still passionate about? Because sometimes, it could be at that level where you might want to consider a career pivot entirely. Or you might be someone who is still passionate and loves, your company or what they do, but you might be struggling in your actual specific position. You might have a leader that you're not connected with. Or so I always say, figure out what the root cause is. Is it granular? Is it something on a bigger level? But if it's something where, maybe you consider a job switch. Maybe you, consider, a pivot, it could be a pivot completely outside of the industry. It could be a pivot where you work at a new company in your industry, or perhaps you might want to pivot to a different area of your company. I've coached people who have been like in the same exact business area or position at companies for like 15 years. Of course, you're going to naturally become complacent, because when you get to a point where you can, as one person stated, I can walk into work and with my eyes closed, do my job every single day, right? That level of comfort is, to me today, in today's world, is dangerous. Because you kind of can't put yourself into this mode where you're just in your little bubble coming in, and I say, flipping the switch on and off every day and going home. So I just say, take the time, and I recommend that people do this. I do this once a year, but for some people that are in certain, maybe quarterly, check in with yourself, right? How do you, are you, because I feel like if you are in that position that you just stated, you're disconnected from who you are. Because I feel like someone who's really connected to who they are, they're constantly growing, they're constantly evolving, they have some energy for life. And I don't think that anyone deserves to go years living, in that state where they're just kind of just showing up and going home, and there's no real, enthusiasm or energy for life. So definitely I would say is to reevaluate where you want to go and the position that you're in, and make some moves to kind of make changes.
Yeah. So final question. We've talked about relationships. We've talked about not being complacent. We've talked about, a lot of stuff today, but at the end of the day, what is the most beneficial thing that comes from being a connected leader?
I think the most important thing that comes from being a connected leader is an amazing team. Because at the end of the day, a team cannot exist. A team cannot be productive, cannot be innovative, cannot be creative unless they have a leader. And that's why my personal definition of great leadership involves, someone who not only can connect with their team, but can forge connections among them. That's something that's really, really rare today. I get this feedback all the time that, oh, I have a great relationship with my leader, or I don't, or favoritism, things of that. A great leader, a connected leader, can build a team that not only he respects, but a team that respects each other. And therefore they can work together and they can build whatever they want. I think, that is what makes, an excellent leader and can drive a team to success.
Yeah, that's really good. So I have some rapid fire questions for you. First one, what is your favorite restaurant?
Ooh, favorite. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, so I have a couple of favorite restaurants, but I would say Storico Orza. It's a local restaurant here in Atlanta that's amazing.
So you're more of a local joint kind of person?
Yes, I'm coming from New Jersey and being, someone whose grandparents would truck them into the city and go eat at underground restaurants in Chinatown. I am a sucker for good local great food.
Absolutely. Where's your favorite place to vacation?
Ooh, I would say Italy.
I've never been there and I want to go. I've heard
Yes,
it's
please,
beautiful.
on your bucket list. It's just simple. It doesn't seem simple. People think it's a lavish vacation. It's just simple. Great food, wine. It's just they live simply.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had to recommend one book to my listeners on leadership, what would it be?
Ooh, one book on leadership. Oh, there's so many. I'm like looking back because there's so many. Actually, I'm just looking at one right now that I'm about to start reading again. Simon Sinek, Find Your Why.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, literally, I have it like right there. I think that's a great one because, again, back to my philosophy of, connecting first with yourself and then with others. I think that's a great book that aligns with that.
Absolutely. I'm a big Simon fan.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to do outside of work?
Ooh, spend time with family and travel. Travel's it.
Mm-hmm. And finally, where can my listeners get more information on what you do and the work that you do?
Sure. So I have a website. It's connectwithmichelle.com. So it's connect, just the W with Michelle. But I recently gave myself a challenge to do more videos. So I'm on Instagram and also on TikTok as well with the name Michelle Enjoli.
Cool. Well, Michelle, I really enjoyed this conversation today, and I want to thank you for coming on, and hopefully our listeners can grab some pieces and apply it to their personal lives and their professional careers, and hope we can all get better from it. And again, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lead to Win podcast. You can find all of Michelle's links in the description of this episode if you'd like to connect or want more information. Be sure to set those notifications to receive updates on new episodes. The Lead to Win podcast can be found on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts, and a new episode comes out every Tuesday morning. I'm your host, Bo Bergen.